So today's topic is the religious status of the world, and this too is part of the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ. We're still covering the situation of Arabia before the advent of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, and inshallah today I'll be shedding light upon the religious status of the Arabs before the advent of the Prophet ﷺ, or rather the entire world. That what was the religious status of that era prior to the bi'tha, prior to the advent of Rasulullah ﷺ. And the reason why we need to illustrate this is so that we can appreciate the blessings of the Prophet ﷺ when he was ultimately charged with the responsibility of disseminating, proliferating the message of Islam. So when we understand pre-Islamic Arabia, right, we will appreciate Islam a lot more, because we understand and we see that pre-Islamic Arabia, it was a really bad situation for people to be living in that time. I mean, different types of dhulm, different types of atrocities were taking place. And these atrocities, they were suppressed and they were quelled and they were completely removed from the society after the bi'tha of the Prophet ﷺ. So this is for comprehension, that when we have opposite of something, we can comprehend what exactly we're trying to understand. So when there is night, we appreciate the day. Right? When there is night, we appreciate the day. Black, and we understand white. So this is to understand exactly what the Prophet ﷺ's bi'tha meant, what his advent meant to the people of Arabia at that time. When we understand Jahiliyyah, idolatry, paganism that was prevalent prior to Islam, then we will appreciate the innumerable blessings the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ came with. So we know that every nation had their respective prophets. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this in the Quran, وَإِن مِّنْ أُمَّةٍ إِلَّا خَلَا فِيهَا نَذِيرٌ, that every nation had a prophet. A prophet came to each and every single nation. The Arabs too had a prophet. Right? Prior to Muhammad ﷺ, the people who were living in that region, they had a prophet. Their prophet was Ibrahim alayhi and Ismail alayhi. This is something that the Quran attests to. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, مِلَّةَ أَبِيكُمْ إِبْرَاهِيمُ Millata abikum Ibrahim, the deen of your father Ibrahim. What does this mean? It is alluding to the fact that the Arab people, they did have a prophet, and their prophet was Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. Now Ibrahim alayhi salam, he sanctioned many practices in that region. Right? There was quite a number of practices that Ibrahim alayhi salam had sanctioned. So these remained for thousands of years until the coming of the Prophet ﷺ. Of the practices that Ibrahim ﷺ sanctioned, Makkah was considered as haram. Makkah was considered as sacred, a consecrated area. Why is the haram sacred? Why is it consecrated? Halal things that we can normally do outside of the haram, it is impermissible for us to do them within the precincts of the haram. So for example, hunting game. This is something that is permissible outside of the haram. But in the haram, we can't hunt game. The precincts of the haram, it is impermissible, and it's a violation to hunt game. We can't even point to an animal and say that, let's catch this, let's eat it. It doesn't work like that. So the haram, it's strictly prohibited to hunt game. We can't pull out the plants in the haram. This too is not permissible, to pull out plants or anything of the sort. So there are certain things in the haram that are not permissible to do, but they are halal outside of the haram. So hunting game, this is one. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَنْ دَخَلَهُ كَانَ آمِنًا, that a person who enters the sanctuary of the haram, then this person is protected. This person is protected. He is safeguarded. So any criminal, what this means is that any criminal who commits an act, commits a crime, perpetrates a crime, and he seeks sanctuary in the haram, that criminal is going to be safe. You're going to have to smoke him out to levy any kind of punishment on him. And this has been done, where somebody did something which would require the had to be passed upon him. So you can't really force that person out of the haram. You would have to use some kind of legal stratagem to weed this person out, so this individual comes out, and then the punishment is levied on him. And the Jahili Arabs, they upheld a lot of the practices of Ibrahim والسلام, and Ismail والسلام, because both of them, Ibrahim and Ismail, they were prophets of the Arabs. So Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, he says that we would see the murder of a father, because this is something that the Arabs were constantly involved in. They were constantly involved in three vices. Right? There was three vices that they were involved in. One of them was, this is the three main vices, I should say. One of them was war. Right? One of them was war. The second vice that they were involved in was women, that they would have illicit relations. And the third was wine, excessive drinking of wine. These were three major vices, three major sins that the Arabs, they were involved in. So Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anh, he says that we would see the murder of a father. During the tawaf, we were doing tawaf because this too was something that was sanctioned by Ibrahim a.s., the tawaf around the Baytullah. So we would see the murder of a father. The son would see. And he was unable to do anything because this is the haram. You can't do anything in the haram. You can't retaliate in the haram. So Ibrahim a.s., he also instituted the sanctity of the 4 months. There are 4 months which are considered as Ashhurul Hurum. Right? Ashhurul Hurum, this was upheld by the Arabs as well. The consecrated months, the sacred months. Right? So this was something that was understood by the Jahili Arabs. And this was upheld even after Rasulullah ﷺ became a prophet. So in the sacred months, for example, hostilities must cease. So if you are at war, then that's it, game over. No more war. But they circumvented that by engaging in something called nasi. Right? Nasi, which was intercalating of months. They would add days to the month so that they can continue their war. So this was one of their legal stratagems. So this was called nasi. And everybody was doing it. The Jews up to date, they still do it. This is why their holidays, they fall under the same month every single year, because they're adding days to their calendar. So they follow a lunar solar calendar. The Arabs, they always followed a lunar calendar. Right? The Jewish people, they follow a lunar as well as a solar calendar. And they intercalate the days into this calendar so that they can do certain things that they're not supposed to be doing. But anyway, no war is permitted during Ashhurul Hurum, the sacred months. Ibrahim, he instituted the Hajj. Right? He instituted the Hajj. The Sa'i between Safa and Marwa, this is also something that Ibrahim a.s. instituted. Sacrificing of the animals, right? Garlanding animals. Right? This too is from the practices of Ibrahim a.s. So garlanding animals, the only place I've seen this done, I mean, I'm not sure about other regions, but in Pakistan, they garland the animals, right? During the Eid al-Adha, is that, because I've seen this, where they beautify the animals, they put, roses and stuff to identify that this animal is for sacrifice. I'm not sure if they do it in other regions, but this is also a sunnah, where they garland the animal, they beautify the animal. And this is to commemorate the sacrifice of Ibrahim a.s. So this is specifically done during Eid al-Adha, right? During the Hajj period, where they garland the animals. And this is known that these animals, they're dedicated to the poor. So these are practices that Ibrahim a.s., he instituted. And these all came from Ibrahim a.s. Now, Western researchers, they may say that, or they may claim that this was all paganistic. That these were all paganistic practices. The practices that the Prophet ﷺ adopted, he adopted them, and then he added his 2 cents, changed them into something Islamic. But this is far from the truth. Rather, Rasulullah ﷺ resurrected the original Ibrahimic sunnahs, the original practices of Ibrahim a.s., and cleansed it from paganism. He cleansed it from paganism. For example, they were doing tawaf without clothing. They were doing tawaf unclothed. And their logic was that, how can we do tawaf in our clothing when we are sinning in our clothes? This was their logic, right? That we're constantly engaging in different types of sins. So the tawaf, this is a pure thing, and the haram is a pure place. We should not be wearing clothing. So they would do tawaf unclothed, and this was their reasoning. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he removed these paganistic beliefs, these rationalities, and he reinstituted the original Ibrahimic traditions, the original Ibrahimic sunnahs. So if the Arabs have a prophet, and the prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam, where exactly did this paganism and idolatry come from? It's a grand question, right? Valid question. If their prophet is Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam, then how did these paganistic beliefs where did they originate from? What is the origin of them? How did idolatry come into the peninsula? How did it come into Arabia? How did it enter into Arabia? So the Prophet ﷺ, he mentions in a hadith, this is in Muslim, he said that I saw Amr bin Luhay Khuza'i wandering in the fire of hell with his entrails cut open behind him. This was a very severe punishment. Now, who is Amr bin Luhay? Amr bin Luhay, I'm going to discuss Amr bin Luhay. This person was guilty of changing the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam. This is who Amr bin Luhay is. He was the one responsible for introducing paganistic practices in that region, as well as idolatry. Now Amr, he introduced superstitions as well. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about this in the Quran, that مَا جَعَلَ اللَّهُ مِن بَحِيرَةٍ وَلَا سَائِبَةٍ وَلَا وَصِيلَةٍ وَلَا هَا, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not instituted the sacrifice of certain specific animals. So bahira, sa'iba, wasila, these are specific animals. These are very specific animals. The seventh offspring of the seventh animal. The permutation is very strange and unusual. I didn't even bother memorizing it. So very strange permutation. But this animal should be sacrificed for the gods. This is what they would do. These are the superstitions. And if this is done, then they will receive so much barakat, they will receive so many blessings. So it's narrated that this Amr bin Luhay al-Khuza'i, he traveled to Syria. And in the region of Syria, the Amalek, they were residing in that area. The Amalekites, right? The Amalek. They were tall, they were very powerful. Very tall people, very powerful. Some people, these are exaggerated claims, but 20 feet tall, all exaggerated, probably really tall. Right? NBA player tall. Okay. So he traveled to this region of Syria, and he found these people worshipping idols. Right? They were worshipping idols. So he inquired that, what are these idols? Why are you worshipping these idols? They said, this is the source of our power. Because they were a very advanced nation. The Amalek, they were a very advanced nation. Technologically, they were advanced. In every way, it seemed that they were successful. They were successful people in every manner, in every aspect. Amr bin Luhay, he asked that, where's this success coming from? So they said, this is from the worship of idols. This is why we are successful. So they said that this is the source of our power. These idols are the source of our power. And if there's a drought or if we're hungry, then we pray to them. We pray to these idols. So Amr bin Luhay, he asked for an idol, that give me one idol. So they gave him Hubal. And this is a very famous idol that comes in narrations. So one specific narration, this was during the Battle of Uhud. Abu Sufyan, and this is after hundreds of years. So Abu Sufyan and Uhud, when a temporary victory was won by the non-Muslims, right? Abu Sufyan, he in a loud voice, he proclaimed, U'lu Hubul, U'lu Hubul, may Hubul be exalted. So the Prophet ﷺ, he was seeking sanctuary in a cave. They were resting, right? Because this was a temporary defeat for the Muslims. So the Prophet ﷺ told the Sahaba that respond to Abu Sufyan. We can't let this go. Right? So the Sahaba, they inquired, Ya Rasulullah, what do we say? How do we respond? Rasulullah ﷺ taught them, respond by saying, Allahu Mawlana wa la Mawla lakum. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our overseer, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our protector, and wa la Mawla lakum. You have no overseer, you have no protector. But this is where Hubal was used by Abu Sufyan, or one narration where Hubal was used. Now Amr bin Luhay al-Khuza'i, he changed the talbiyah. What is the talbiyah that we're supposed to read in Hajj? Right? لبيك اللهم لبيك لبيك لا شريك لك لبيك إن الحمد والنعمة لك الملك لا شريك لك. This is the talbiyah, right? That we have to read as Hajis. So the talbiyah, what does it mean? It's present, and it's a response to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's command in the Quran. وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ. That tell the people about Hajj, tell the people to come for Hajj. Right? وَأَذِّن فِي النَّاسِ بِالْحَجِّ. Proclaim the Hajj to the people. So this is our response. لبيك, oh Allah, I'm present. Allahumma labbaik. So this Amr bin Luhay al-Khuzai, he changed this talbiyah as well. He changed the talbiyah. So what did he do? Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika lak. So far so good, right? Illa sharika huwa laka tamlikuhu wa ma malak. So what does this translate to? This is what he changed. So this translates to, except for a partner who belongs to you, you control this partner and you control everything that he controls. So this is paganism. This is idolatry. So they're basically saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala controls the partners. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the big boss, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is controlling these smaller idols. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is like, similar to, who's familiar with Greek mythology? So Greek mythology, you have the big guy, Zeus, or Jupiter or something, right? And then you have, these smaller and lesser gods, like, Hermes and Poseidon and all of these guys. I don't know. I used to read this the Odyssey and the Iliad, very famous novels written by what's that guy's name? I think his name is Hector or something. But in there you have an introduction of all of the gods. There's a lot of tanaqulat, but it's a fiction book, so it probably makes for a good reading. But anyway, it was similar. The people, they considered the Quraysh, they considered these smaller idols to be lesser gods and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to be a great God. So the Quraysh, they invented this new interpretation. Now, when did Amr live? So as far as dates are concerned, this is not something that is recorded. We don't have exact dates because the Arabs, they never recorded dates. They recorded occasions. So Rasulullah's exact birth date, we don't know. But what we do know, he was born Amul Fil. This is common knowledge. That he was born the year of the elephant, the year when Abraha, he attempted to attack the Haram. So we know this. So they recorded occasions. They never recorded years and dates or anything along those lines. There was no calendar until Umar radiallahu anh. Umar radiallahu anh was the first person to institute a calendar. And this was because there was a lot of ambiguity, because there was a lot of wealth coming into Medina, so there was a lot of ambiguity in repaying of debts and how people should receive their stipends, because Umar radiallahu anh established welfare for the people who are unable to earn. So certain people, for example, elderly folk, who are unable to earn anything and pay zakat or pay any kind of jizya or any kind of taxes. So Umar radiallahu anh would take care of them. Right? So what he did was that he established a monthly stipend for these individuals. Umar radiallahu anh was the first person to do this. And he established a monthly stipend even for the azwaj mutahharat, the wives and consorts of the Prophet ﷺ. So there was no calendar. As far as the hijrah calendar is concerned, there was no calendar until Umar radiallahu anh instituted one. And this was because there was a lot of IOUs, monthly stipend, things of this nature. So the generation of Umar was the generation of Fihr, one of the great grandfathers of the Prophet ﷺ. So the first century of the Christian era. This was when Amr bin Luhay al-Khuzai, this was when he existed. Now, this is to give you some context. Rasulullah ﷺ was born in the 6th century of the Christian era, approximately 570, 571. Right? So that gives you some context. So you have about, how many years? 500? About five centuries. You have about 5 centuries prior, where Amr introduces Hubr, and he sets him near the Baytullah. So now it took 5 centuries for paganism to spread. It took 5 centuries for paganism and idolatry to spread. Now, everyone should have an objection over here. How is it possible that one person, he disseminated these teachings. This was one person, Amr bin Luhay al-Khuzai. How is it possible for one person to do it? How did he change the religion of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam? So there's a few causes that the scholars they've mentioned. Right? So the first cause is that Amr, he had an inferiority complex. He had an inferiority complex. This is the first cause. Right? Right? That he had an inferiority complex for the Amalekites. The Amalekites, they were undefeated. And the Old Testament, it testifies to this, that they were undefeated in war. They were a very advanced nation. They were technologically advanced. In every way, in every aspect, they were advanced. So powerful that Amr, he assumed that whatever they are doing, it has to be correct. Whatever they're doing, whatever they're saying, there must be something there. So maybe their success is due to their worship of these idols. Right? But this line of reason, as we know, this is erroneous on so many counts. Because code of ethics, morality, theology, these are things that you can't take from a nation simply because they're strong, simply because they have everything. That's not how it works. Just because a nation is doing something, is advanced in every single way, doesn't necessarily mean that this nation is right. And this is something that each and every one of us, we need to understand, because so many movements are taking place that, we have to reform Islam. It's coming from the West. It's coming from the West that, we have to reform Islam. We have to change Islam. We have to make sure that it conforms with the times, right? So we have to understand that just because it's coming from the West, and the West, the place where we're living, it's a very mighty industry. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be correct. Now, who was Amr, and why was he influential? So this is the second question. He was influential because he was the chief of the tribe of Khuza'ah. He was the chief of the tribe of Khuza'ah. These were his credentials. That he was influential because, number one, he was the chief of Khuza'ah, not the Quraysh. The Quraysh came later. The people loved him. Right? The people loved him. He was the chief, the people loved him, he was generous, and he defended Makkah from wars. So because of that, he had the hearts of the people. So when he imported this theology from Syria, from the Amalekites, they're like, okay, yeah, we'll follow you. We'll follow you to the end. The third reason was that the time from Ibrahim alayhi salam to this point was approximately 2,000 years. So it was a long time. And it's very likely that the teachings of Ibrahim alayhi salam and Ismail alayhi salam, they became diluted over time. And this is what happens with religions. It becomes corrupted over time, with the sole exception of Islam. Because in Islam, what we have today is something that dates all the way back to the Prophet ﷺ. So we have something called the Sunnah that I went over it last week. So people became mesmerized by what Amr bin Luhay was saying. And some history books mention that Amr was also responsible for the worship of other idols as well. So other idols that are mentioned in the Quran, right? Wad, right? Suwa, Yaghuth, Ya'uq, Nasr, they all come in Surah An-Nur. So Amr bin Luhay, he was the one guilty, he was the one responsible for the worship of these other idols too. So different tribes, they worshipped different idols. So you have one tribe worshipping Wad, another tribe Suwa, Yaghuth, Ya'uq, Nasr. So certain Arab tribes, they worship them. Amr, he put Hubal in front of the Kaaba. This is what he did. He put Hubal in front of the Kaaba, and from this, people began proliferating idols. People began to worship the stones of the Kaaba. They thought maybe, because they were distant from the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam, from the deen of Ismail alayhi salam, so they started to worship the stones of the Kaaba, that the Kaaba was built with, right? So the caravans, they would visit Makkah, and what would happen, because this was Hajj, people were still doing Hajj even in the time of the Prophet ﷺ, although it was a very corrupt Hajj. And they introduced many bid'at and innovations and didn't even resemble like a proper Hajj. But again, this was a corrupted form of the deen of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So caravans, they would come, and what they would do is that they would take a stone from the Kaaba, and then they would worship this stone. They would take the stone and they would worship the stone. Right? So the bricks aren't what makes the Kaaba holy. Right? The bricks of the Kaaba aren't what makes the Kaaba holy. Right? Because the last construction that took place was about 10-15 years ago. So it isn't really the bricks or the covering that makes the Kaaba holy. What makes the Kaaba holy? The thing that makes the Kaaba holy is the location. It's that place. It's the area. That area is consecrated. Not necessarily the imara, not necessarily the building, the structure. That's going to fall over time. That's going to become dilapidated over time. It's going to be weak. The foundations will have to be erected again, rebuilt. So this is what happens with buildings over long periods of time. So the Kaaba that we see today, this is probably 10, 15-year-old construction or something. But people, they would take pieces of the Kaaba. So some certain people, this is what even people now, this is what they desire, that we should take one piece of the Kaaba and perhaps there's some kind of greatness attached to it. And this is how idolatry begins. This is how idolatry starts. There's a hadith from Abu Raja Utaridi, very famous Sahabi. So he mentions that we worshipped rocks and stones. Abu Raja al-Utaridi, he says that we worship rocks and stones. And if we found a more beautiful rock, we would throw away the old stone that we were worshipping. And we worship that. And if we found no stone to worship, and we're in the desert, we're trekking across the desert, then what we would do is that we would make a mound from the sand. So we would take the sand, we would make a mound, and we would milk our goat over that to make it like, so it's like a proper, it's congealed and everything. And then we would worship that. We would worship that. This is what they were doing. And they would do tawaf over this. They would pray to it. We're sitting over here and just hearing this. This is astonishing. We're just probably sitting wondering, how is this possible? And we're bewildered that how is something like this possible? But this is common even today. If you go to certain areas, certain countries in the world, this is very common, where there's idols and temples and weird looking shapes, and people are going there and putting food. So if it's going on now, then definitely it was going on at that time. So even Muslims today, they in certain mausoleums they'll present food and stuff. I've seen this as well, where Muslims, they'll go to mausoleums, they'll go to these dargahs and stuff, and they'll present food and everything. Even at graves, certain graves they'll present food in. But there is no barakah in that. These are just paganistic practices. And this is bi'aynihi shirk, something that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came with. He came to remove. So Safa and Marwa, this is another thing. Safa and Marwa also had idols. Right? These idols, they were called Na'ila and Asaf. These were two idols that Safa. So Safa had Na'ila and Marwa had Asaf. These were two idols. Now, the Quraysh, they would touch both of these idols during Tawaf. So when Islam came, the Muslims, they were hesitant that, we have to do sa'i between Safa and Marwa. So we don't, how can we do it? They were a little bit hesitant. This is something that is resembling of the people who were involved in paganism and idolatry. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed that inna Safa wal Marwata min sha'airillah. That Safa and Marwa, these are the signs of Allah. They were signs of Allah way before the Quraysh, they polluted and corrupted the practices of Ibrahim alayhi salam. They were holy before these two idols were placed there. These places were holy even before that. Now who are Na'ila and Asaf? Both of them, they were lovers. Na'ila and Asaf, they were both lovers. And the story goes that they couldn't consummate their love. So what they did is that they used the interior of the Kaaba, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala petrified them. So the Quraysh, they took this as a miracle. And they placed these two idols on Safa and Marwa. Now this shows the paganism that the Arabs were upon. These were just some of the practices that they were involved in. When Makkah was conquered, the Kaaba had 350 idols. 350 idols when the conquest of Makkah took place. After which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam cleansed and removed all of these idols and removed idolatry from the lands of Arabia forever. So some of the idols were weird shapes. You might probably read them in Harry Potter. Those who were involved, experts in Harry Potter, centaurs and half animals and sphinx and all of this weird stuff. These were what the idols were resembling. Centaurs and half human, half animal. These were the things that they were worshipping. And they had all of these idols sitting smack in the middle of Baytullah, smack in the middle of Kaaba. We learned that the Quraysh, they had this understanding that the angels, they believed in angels, but the angels, they are the daughters of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So corrupt belief. Everything about them, it was corrupt. So the Arabs, one of the things that they didn't have was creed. They didn't have a universal creed. As Muslims, we know our creed, right? We believe in the 7 articles of faith. Amantu billah wa malaikatihi wa kutubihi. Yeah, we have these 7 articles of faith. So we know what makes us Muslim. But the Arabs, they didn't have a creed. Similar to the Hindus today. If you ask a Hindu, what do you worship? Oh, I worship this. You ask another, I worship this. You ask another. So they have no universal creed. Everyone has a different perception of their religion. So there is no universal creed. Some believed in Qiyamah. Right? Some people didn't believe in Qiyamah. Some of the Arabs, they believed in Qiyamah. Some believed in the hereafter. Some believed in resurrection. Others didn't. So there was no such thing as a universal creed. One thing that they did agree upon, that we need to worship idols. No matter what, we need to worship idols. And this is to gain closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We need to gain proximity to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, was the entire nation idolatrous? Was the entire nation idolatrous? There were some who were not. Some who were not involved in idolatry. Some were on Deen Hanif. Some were on Deen Hanif. Now what does Hanif mean? Hanif means to turn away. So these people, they turned away from idolatry. They turned away from idolatry. One such person was Qus bin Sa'ida. His name was Qus bin Sa'ida. He was on Deen Hanif, and he was from Bahrain, the region of Bahrain, Amman. So he would come for Hajj, right? Because there was a Hajj every single year. So he would come for Hajj, and he would preach against idolatry. He preached against worshipping of idols. And he was a poet, a very great poet, and very eloquent. And people say that his speech, it was the most resembling of the Quran. It was not the Quran, but the most resembling of the Quran. So there's one, he says, Ya ayyuhan nas. And he says, Ya ayyuhan nas, isma'u wa'u. Wa idha sami'tum fantafi'u. Inna man 'asha mat. Wa man mata fat. Wa kullu ma huwa atin at. Ya ma'shara iyad. Ayna thamud wa 'ad. وأين الآباء والأجداد وأين المعروف الذي لم يشكر وظلم الذي لم ينكر أقسم قس بالله إن الله لدينا أرضى من دينكم هذا. This is one of his poetries. So what he's saying over here, that, oh people, listen and pay attention. وَإِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ فَانْتَفِعُوا. And listen and benefit from what I'm trying to tell you. إِنَّ مَنْ عَاشَ مَاتٍ. Everybody is going to die. Everybody is going to leave this world. وَمَنْ مَاتَ فَاتٍ. And whoever dies, they've lost everything. وَكُلُّ مَا هُوَ آتٍ آتٍ. The decree of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the decree of our Lord, this is going to come to pass. Ya ma'shara Ayad. His tribe, its name was Ayad. He was from the tribe of Ayad. So he said that, oh people of Ayad, Ayna Thamud wa Ad. Look at the previous nations that came. You know Thamud, you know Ad. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about them in the Quran. We know this. But these were two nations that they were familiar with. Thamud and Ad. That they were destroyed. So, where is Thamud? Where is Ad? وَإِنَ الْآبَاء وَالْأَجْدَادِ. Where are your fathers? Where are your forefathers? وَإِنَ الْمَعْرُوفُ الَّذِي لَمْ يُشْكَرْ. That when good is done, people are not appreciated. That good is not being recompensed in any way. And when dhulm is perpetrated, nobody is doing nakir. Nobody is saying that, you're doing dhulm. How is it that you are doing dhulm? How is it that you are committing this kind of oppression? Shame on you. So then he says that, I swear by Allah, إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَدِينًا. That verily, there is a deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَرْضَى مِن دِينِكُمْ هَذَا. It is more pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala than that which you are following. He doesn't know what it is. He doesn't know what it is. He's using his aql. He's using his rationale to determine that whatever these people are doing, it's wrong. There has to be something better than this. So he doesn't know, because the Prophet ﷺ is not yet sent. He hasn't been sent to the people of Arabia. So many years later, in the 9th Hijri, in the 9th year of Hijrah, the tribe of Banu Iyad, they accepted Islam. They came to the Prophet ﷺ, and Rasulullah ﷺ inquired, where is Qus? They said, oh, he died a long time ago. He died a long time ago. And Rasulullah ﷺ recounted that Qus, he would come, and he was on this red camel, and he had mesmerizing speech. He had amazing speech. He would speak in a very eloquent manner. So Rasulullah ﷺ still remembered the verses of Qus bin Sa'ida. Right? So it shows that there were remnants of Tawheed. There were remnants of Tawheed. People did believe that there is one Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, 4 names from the Hunafa, from the people who turned away from idolatry before the coming of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. The Quraysh, what they would do is that they would hold festival in the place called Ukaz. They would hold a festival. And what they did, this was outside of Makkah. What they did was that during this festival, they would exalt their idols, do tawaf around them, and they would sacrifice for the sake of their idols. And after this festival, after one such festival, 4 people left behind. So, you have some stragglers. Right? So these were like 4 stragglers who were left behind. And they realized that, we don't agree with idolatry. We don't agree with paganism. And these 4, they became friends. Now, who were these 4 people that were on Deen Hanif? These 4 people were Waraqa bin Nawfal, right? The cousin of Khadija al-Kubra, radiyallahu anha. Ubaidullah bin Jahash, Uthman bin Huwairis, Zayd bin Amr bin Nufayl. These were the 4 people who were on Deen Hanif. I'm going to speak about each of them. So they all decided that, we shouldn't stay here anymore because situation is bad. It's getting worse. Day by day, it's getting worse. And let's search for Hanifiyah. Let's search for something that is better than what people are following now. Let's do this. Let's search for it. So Waraqa, he became a Christian. Okay, and I'm going to go into Christianity as well, the different types of Christianity. So he learned Aramaic, he learned Hebrew, and he became a scholar, a very well-versed scholar. And it comes in Bukhari, the second hadith, right? In the first chapter, كيف كان بدء الوحي إلى رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم. So the first chapter that Imam Bukhari starts with is that how did the wahi initiate? Every scholar has their own way of starting a book. So Imam Bukhari, his perception was that everything came from wahi, so let me start my book with how the wahi came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. For example, Imam Malik rahimahullah, he starts with wuqutu salah, the timing for salah. Why does he start with timing of salah? Because if the timing of salah is not there, then wudu doesn't become fard, right? Because we need to do wudu for the salah to be correct. Anyway, I'm going off a tangent. As I was saying, so Waraqa, he was, when Rasulullah received wahi for the first time, Iqra bismi rabbika alladhi khalaq, he goes home, he tells his wife to cover him up, Khadija al-Kubra, and he explains to his wife, recounts the entire episode that took place in the cave of Hira. And then Khadija al-Kubra, she makes the decision, I'm going to take you to my cousin Waraqa bin Nawfal. And Waraqa bin Nawfal, he was well versed in Aramaic, he was well versed in Hebrew, he was familiar with the old texts. He was a very learned man, and he was approximately 80 years old at that time. So the Prophet of Allah, he mentions what took place, he mentions what transpired, and Waraqa bin Nawfal, he's hearing this, and he gives him bashara. He gives him glad tidings that this is the same namus, this is namus that came to Musa alayhi salam, and that came to prophets before you. You're a prophet. You're a prophet. He was very happy. So some people, there's a debate among scholars where they say that the first Muslim, who was the first Muslim? Right? From the men, not from the women. Who was the first Muslim? They say Abu Bakr. But scholars, they cite this hadith, right, to show that the first Muslim was not Abu Bakr. It was Waraqa bin Nawfal. Because he clearly acknowledged the prophethood of Rasulullah. He did tasdeeq. He attested to his prophethood. And he said that if I were to live, if I was younger, then I would give you my full support. And he also mentioned that your people are going to expel you. And Rasulullah was astonished. He said, my people are going to expel me? How is it possible? Because Rasulullah was a very honored individual. They called him Amin, Sadiq. They had all of these honorifics for him. So he said, my people are going to do this to me? So Waraqa, yes, this is what happened to all of the prophets. Right? That they would expel the prophet from their area, from the place where they're living, because they don't want to listen and they don't want to change. So he said that if I was younger, I would support your cause. But after a few months after that, he passed away. Waraqa bin Nawfal passed away. The second person is Ubaydullah bin Jahash. This is a sad story. He converted, but he became apostate. He was married to Habiba. He was married to Habiba, the sister of Abu Sufyan. Habiba was the sister of Abu Sufyan, the staunch enemy of Islam. So Ubaydullah bin Jahash, he was married to her. He became apostate, and after becoming apostate, he went back to Christianity. Right? So this is another thing that we should think about. That some people think that a person who changes his deen, he became apostate in the area of Abyssinia, the land of Abyssinia, present-day Ethiopia. So people think that if a person becomes murtad, man baddala dinahu faqtuluhu, that whoever changes his deen, kill him. Right? So there's a lot of debate amongst scholars as to when the hudud should be even applied. Some people, they just quote things out of context. That, oh yeah, you know what? Hudud, they should be applied at all times. If anybody who changes his deen, you know what? We should become vigilantes like Batman and just go and kill that person. Oh, we're not Batman and we're not vigilantes. This is not how Islam works. Right? If we go throughout the annals of history, right, we'll see that rarely were the hudud ever applied, because the conditions to even apply the had is extremely strict. There's a number of conditions. So it isn't as simple as, Rasulullah, the Prophet said, Man baddala dinahu faqtuluhu. Okay, what if a Christian turns into a Jew? You're going to kill him? Right? Or vice versa, you're going to kill him? Because the hadith is very general. It doesn't say, Man baddala deen al-Islam faqtuluhu. It doesn't say that. It says only, Man baddala deen faqtuluhu. It says deen. So it's a very general statement. So there's a lot of detail when discussing hadith of such nature, especially hudud, because this is like a big time thing that the Westerners, they attack Islam about. That, oh, you guys chop off people's hands and you kill people, and people who've had illicit relations, you stone them to death. So can you show me any example where the had was applied? I argued with one individual, and I said that, look, in certain places, right, in parks, if you litter, you get fined like $2,000. Do you know anybody who has been fined $2,000 for littering? I don't know anybody. Do you know anyone? So similarly, if you go through history, you'll see that the hudud, they were rarely applied. And if they were applied once or twice, they were applied incorrectly and erroneously. And this has been acknowledged by the scholars who were living in that time. One of the greatest, and I'm going off a tangent over here, I'm going to come back. One of the greatest sultans was Sultan Suleiman Qanuni. Right? Suleiman, the legislator, the lawgiver, Qanuni, right? Ottoman. And he ruled for approximately 50 years. And during his reign, and I've read through his entire history. During his reign, I read through entire Ottoman history. During his reign, no had was applied. Rather, they would subject the people to monetary penalties. They would subject them to monetary penalties. And this is also a valid had, according to many scholars. Because to prove something that requires capital punishment is very severe. It's impossible to do it. It is impossible to do it. Even at the time of the Prophet ﷺ, it was never done. The only time it was done is when the person himself admitted to his guilt. Otherwise, it is not done. It was not even done at the time of the Prophet ﷺ. But anyway, Uthman bin Huwayrith, he was the third person. He remained a Christian. And he left Makkah and he never returned. He traveled to Rome and he became an interpreter in Rome. So this was the third person who was on Deen Hanif. He never participated in idolatry. Now, Zayd bin Amr bin Nufayl, he accepted neither Christianity nor did he accept Judaism. So he didn't accept Christianity nor did he accept Judaism. He comes to Makkah and he tells them that only I am on the deen of Ibrahim al-Islam. He tells the people of Makkah that only I remain on the deen of Ibrahim al-Islam. He rebukes the Quraysh for idolatry, killing their daughters. And he becomes a caretaker. He becomes a caretaker for the girls that they were going to kill. So any girl who was going to, he would tell the family that you give me this girl. I will raise her, I will take care of her, and then I will marry her. I will take the responsibility. she will be my daughter, and I will take the response. So he would adopt them and he would raise them as his own children. The Prophet ﷺ, he realized the animosity between the Quraysh and Zayd bin Amr bin Nufayl. So he asked Zayd bin Amr bin, Ma sha'nuka? What is this? What's this animosity between you and the Quraysh? Ma sha'nuka? What is this animosity between you and the Quraysh? So the Prophet ﷺ, because he never engaged in idolatry as well, he found a kindred spirit in the form of Zayd bin Amr. So the Prophet ﷺ never engaged in idolatry, never presented food or did tawaf or anything of the sort. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had protected him. Now he died 5 years before the bi'tha. He died 5 years before Rasulullah ﷺ was the Prophet, at the age of 35. That's when he passed away. Zayd bin Amr bin Nufayl. So his son, we rarely speak about his son. His son's name is Sa'id bin Zayd. Sa'id bin Zayd is one of the Ashara Mubashara. He is one of the 10 who was guaranteed paradise in his lifetime in this world. Sa'id bin Zayd, very famous Sahabi. So Sa'id, once he asks his father, Ya Rasulullah, tell me about my father, that how is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala going to deal with him? And you can be truthful with me. I'm not going to mind what you're going to say. He was concerned about his father. Any son would be. So the Prophet ﷺ said that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with 2 gardens. That during Isra, Rasulullah ﷺ saw Zayd bin Amr, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has blessed him with 2 gardens. And Rasulullah ﷺ continues and says that on the day of Qiyamah, he will be resurrected his own ummah, as a single person of his own ummah. That it shows us that people, prior to Islam, people managed to enter Jannah. It was possible for people to enter Jannah as long as there was no engagement of paganism or idolatry. And this is again a theological issue where theologists, they speak about this, that if a person doesn't receive a convincing message of Islam, doesn't engage in idolatry, believes in one God, can this person enter paradise? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, this person can enter paradise. So this is this is a debated topic. It comes in Islamic polemics between certain groups, but nonetheless, and each one they've presented their evidences for or against. But it's there. The discussion is there, and this is one of the evidences for the people who say that yes, it's possible for a person to enter paradise even though he may not believe in Rasulullah ﷺ, because a convincing message has not yet reached him. Right? So he will be resurrected his own ummah. But this is the Arabia. This is what was going on in Arabia. Right? Whatever was going on, this is the story. Now you have other nations also during that time. So the Arabs, they were one nation. Then you have the Romans, and you have the Persians. So you have the Romans. They were proponents and believers of Christianity, and you have the Persians. Now the Persians, they were Zoroastrians, Parsis. They were fire worshippers. Right? So the fire worshippers, they believe in the God of fire and the God of light and the God of darkness. What was his name? What was the god of Ahura and Ahriman. Right? These are the 2 gods of the Zoroastrians, the God of fire and the God of darkness. So Christianity was another religion that was common. So the Christianity of Rome, there were 3 major strands of Christianity. There are 3 major groups of Christianity. One was Gnosticism, right, which is a mystic understanding of Christianity. So it's similar to the Batiniya, right, or people who have heard about the Karamita, right, or Nizari Ismailis, or Dawoodi Boris. In Karachi, there's an area in Sadr, which is occupied by Dawoodi Boris. Right? They wear unusual golden color hats, and the women, they have red colored hijabs, the Dawoodi Boris. So what they do is that they have an esoteric meaning of the Quran. So there's an exoteric meaning of the Quran, a direct meaning of the Quran, and an esoteric meaning of the Quran. So the esoteric meaning of the Quran is that there's no such thing as salah. There's only dua. There's no such thing as zakat. There's no such thing as 2.5% of wealth that we have to pay. It just means purification. So this is called esoteric meaning of the Quran. So Gnosticism was something like that, right? Where they interpreted Christianity esoterically. Right? It wasn't true Christianity. And then you have the Pauline Christians. The Pauline Christians was the Christianity that was introduced by the Apostle Paul. He never even met Isa alayhi salam. He was the one who corrupted the religion that Isa alayhi salam came with. And then you have the Jewish Christians, because Isa alayhi salam was sent to the Jewish people. So you have the Jewish Christians. So the Jewish Christians, they believed that Isa alayhi salam was sent to them, meaning the Jews, right? That this person, and they also believed in Isa alayhi salam being the promised Messiah. This is exactly what the Muslims believe. The Jewish Christians, this is precisely what the Muslims believe. Now Paul, what he was doing, the Pauline Christians, they began to distort the teachings of Isa alayhi salam. So they turned Isa alayhi salam into something divine. So that's where the whole thing of 3 is 1 and 1 is 3 comes into existence. Right? This is because of Paul. And this was something that was debated for 300 years. And they were debating this, that which one is haqq? Which Christianity is the truth? Is it the Christianity that was introduced by Paul? Or is it some other form of Christianity? Right? So there was one king by the name of Nero, King Nero, and he would burn the Christians as light, but a very evil person. So he would burn the Christians whenever they would need light. So he would take and burn him to a very evil person. So Nero was Roman, and he was pagan, and he was the worst enemy of the Christians. They were very evil type people. And this was because these Christians, they were being persecuted on account of their religion. They were Jewish Christians, so they were being persecuted by this pagan King Nero. Then a miracle happened from their perspective, right? From the Jewish Christians' perspective. The emperor himself converted. Right? So at that time, Christians were approximately 5% in number. So it's kind of like, Trump today, if he accepts Islam, what would happen? 5%. 5% Muslims over here living in the United States. So if Trump tomorrow becomes Muslim, then most likely he's probably going to be impeached or something. We'll find another reason to impeach him. So anyway, so the emperor, this emperor who accepts Christianity, he convenes the Council of Nicaea. The Council of Nicaea. This is something that most of us may have read about or heard about, and this took place in 325 Christian era, CE. So he decrees that the official Christianity is not Jewish Christianity or Gnosticism. He says the official Christianity is the Pauline Christianity, the Christianity that Paul, the Apostle Paul, who never met Isa alayhi salam, introduced. So this emperor himself, he still had paganistic roots, right? So certain elements of paganism was kept, right, in the religion. So the Christians, they migrated. So some of them migrated to the area where Najashi was king, Ashama. His name was Ashama. So Najashi was the title that was given to the king of Abyssinia. So over there, you had the kingdom of the Jewish Christians living in Abyssinia. They were seeking refuge there. And then you had the Roman Empire. They banished the other Jewish Christians from their empire. So we have some remnants of original Christianity that was saved in different regions of that area. So this was the original Christianity, the Christianity that Isa alayhi salam came with. People were still practicing that. And the proof of it is the story of Salman Farsi. I'm going to go over the story right now, after I finish this. So his story indicates that there were few Christians who were left upon the original deen that Isa alayhi salam brought. Another story is that of Heraclius, Herakal. Right? So Herakal, his name is Heraclius, and it's been Arabicized to Herakal. So his story comes in Bukhari as well. And he too was upon the original Christianity. So he was a very well-read person, and he was familiar with Jewish Christianity, and he himself says that this is the Prophet. He brings Abu Sufyan. He was in Syria. And he finds out about the Prophet ﷺ. And he speaks to Abu Sufyan, who happened in Rihlat al-Shita'i wal-Sayf. There were two caravans that were going, one towards Yemen, one towards Syria. So he asks that, are there any caravans in the area? And happenstance that Abu Sufyan's caravan was there, and then they had a dialogue. They had an exchange where he asks questions about the Prophet ﷺ, and then he finally acknowledges that this is the promised Prophet. And he tells Abu Sufyan that his deen is going to spread, that the deen of this Prophet is going to spread throughout the peninsula. But he never accepted Islam because he was afraid that if I accept Islam, I'm going to lose my power. He wants power. Everybody wants power. So I'm going to lose my power. If I accept Islam, then people are going to, they're going to point fingers at me. And they're going to say that, oh, he accepted Islam, and they're going to remove him from his seat of power. So because of that, Hiraqal, he never accepted Islam. So he too was upon original Christianity. So there's three things that we can take today. First is that guidance only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It doesn't come from philosophy. It's not something rational. It only comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because if it did come from our rationality, if it did come from philosophies and stuff, then from Isa alayhi salam to Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, why is it that no one could provide an answer as to what is the truth? You have 500 years from Isa alayhi salam to the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why is it that not even one person could tell that what is haqq and what is the truth? So modern mankind believes that guidance is something different, and it's the cumulative experience of progressive people. Whoever is progressive, maybe this person has something to say. This person has something that he can guide me with. So moralists, atheists, this ethics people, right? These people who are involved in ethics, philosophers, they have something to say as to what constitutes true guidance. So our guidance is the Quran and Sunnah. It's simple. As Muslims, we follow the Quran and Sunnah. And mankind, we have to understand, mankind could not achieve guidance without the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That until then, people were just living and following their intellect and following their whims and fancies. The second is that most of mankind are sheeple, right? And younger people, they may have heard about this. So they're sheeple. They look at the Quraysh, and it was difficult for them to break away. Look at the Quraysh. It was very difficult for them to break away from idolatry. They knew that they were far from the deen of Ibrahim and Islam, but they persisted in their paganism. They persisted in their idolatry. So mankind desires to follow aql. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala attests to this in the Quran, that people, they follow their aql. They take their aql, they take the rational as gods. And this is a very hedonistic, animalistic trait, that people take their aql as gods, and they do whatever they want to do. And they say, you know what, we only live once, let's do whatever we want to do. Then you have the story of Salman radiallahu anhu and Zayd, right? That these people were on Deen Hanif. And whenever a person is sincere, this person is going to be guided. If a person is sincere, then you look at the example of Salman radiallahu anhu, Salman Farsi radiallahu anhu, and Zayd bin Amr bin Nufayl. Both of these people, they were sincerely looking for guidance, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided them. So I have with me the 39th volume. I said I was going to share this a few weeks back about the hadith of Salman radiallahu anhu. So it's quite a long hadith. This is, as I said, the 39th volume. It's an authentic narration where Salman himself recounts his story. And this is so that I can tell you that there was the original Christianity that people were practicing, the Jewish Christianity that people were practicing. And Salman Farsi was practicing this Christianity, and this Christianity led him towards Islam. This was the Christianity that led him towards Islam. I'm not going to read the Arabic because it's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So 8 pages. I'm not going to read the Arabic, so I'll just translate it quickly into English. So this is a narration from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. So Ibn Abbas, he goes to Salman Farsi when he was older, and he asks Salman Farsi that, tell me your story. So Salman Farsi narrated this twice, once to the Prophet ﷺ and once to Ibn Abbas. So he said that I was a Persian man from Asfahan, and from a village where my father was the head. He was the head of the village. He was the head chief of the village. And I was striving and taking pain in the religion of the Majus, right? That he was the caretaker of the fire, right? And he worshipped the fire. This was the fire which was, they never let it burn out. Right? Even the Parsis over here, the fire worshippers over here, if you ask them how do they get their fire, they have to charter a plane or something to bring that fire over here. And most likely, that author, what's her name? J.K. Rowling, the author who wrote Harry Potter. She probably got that, what's Dumbledore bewitched a branch to burn forever. And it was called Gudrathian fire. And I think the kids over there in the back would probably understand this better. So, so this is probably where J.K. Rowling gets it from, the everlasting fire. Most likely she got it from the Zoroastrian. So anyway, so Salman, he said that I grew into the religion until he became a keeper of the fire. So he was the one who was responsible for lighting the fire, never to let it go out. So they entrusted him. So he was at a very high position. So he said that his father, he owned a farm. And one day, he was constructing a building. So he wanted his son to go out and take care of business on the farm. So Salman radiallahu anhu, said that my father, he loved me a lot. And he would closet him in the house and wouldn't let him leave. He didn't want his son to leave the house. He loved his son a lot. So on that particular day, he said that his father was busy with his building. He was building this building. He was very busy with it. And he wanted him to go on the farm. So he told him that, oh my son, you know how dear you are to me? If you're late, I will be concerned about you. So you are more important to me than this farm and the building. So Salman radiallahu anhu, he looked sad and that, I'm kept in the house like a slave. Why am I a slave? I want to go out, I want to have fun, I want to look at things, I want to experience things. But he was not allowed to go anywhere. So Salman, one day, he went out to the business for his father and passed by a church where Christians were there. And he heard them praying. So these Christians, they were Jewish Christians. They were Jewish Christians. So he wanted to go and investigate. So I didn't know much about people because I never left home. My father would keep me at home. So this was something new to me. So I went to the church. I was impressed by their method of prayer. I ended up staying with them until sunset. And I neglected my father's work. So Christianity, once they were ousted from Rome, they went to different regions and established, monasteries. Right? So this was one region where they established a monastery. So he said to his father, he neglected his father's work. So he said his father was so worried that he sent people to look after him. And when he returned home, his father asked him what happened. So Salman radiallahu anhu said that I came to the church and I saw them, I witnessed their prayer, and I forgot to do the job. So his father said that, oh my son, their religion isn't good. Their religion is not good. Your religion and the religion of your forefathers are better. So his father told him, this is what his father told him. Salman radiallahu anhu, he disagreed. And he told his father that no, their religion is better. So his father was extremely worried, ended up chaining him and imprisoning him. So when Salman was at the church, he had asked the people where the origin of their religion was. They told him Sham. So this was where the Jewish Christians, they came from that region, from Sham, until they were kicked out. And an exodus took place where they settled in different regions and they established monasteries. So now, Salman radiallahu anhu, he's shackled. He managed to send a message to the church, telling them that if there's a caravan coming from Sham, let me know. From present-day Syria, let me know. So when a caravan came, they sent him word. So Salman Farsi, he was able to release himself and he went with the caravan all the way to Sham in search of the truth. He arrived in Syria and asked to speak to the most learned man in the religion. So he's told to visit a certain bishop from a church. He went, explained the situation to the bishop, and this bishop allowed him to stay with him while he was studying Christianity. He lived in the church. So this man used to ask the people to donate, and he would keep the money for himself. He would keep the money. So he would ask people that, give me money, and he would keep the money for himself. And there's a joke, right? Where this man comes to the imam and says that, Imam, I've given talaq to my wife. What should I do? What's the way out? Do you have some kind of hila for me? Do you have some kind of legal stratagem for me? The Imam says, no. That's it, game over. You've done it, so you've done it. So it was time for Asr. The guy put some money under the musalla, right? And after Asr, the Imam, can you reconsider? The Imam says, yeah, okay, sure. So when you said talaq, how did you say it? Did you say it with a ta or a ta? So he said, I said it with a ta. In that case, there's no talaq. Bashara. This is a big thing. So this story found its way to another imam. Right? He said, well, if that's the case, even your nikah is not done. Because when you said nakahtuha, you said it with a ha. Nikahtuha. and not with the ha. So anyway, this bishop, what he was doing, he was guilty of taking the people's money, and he was just filling up and lining his own pockets. Right? And when he died, the people wanted to have a funeral. And Salman radiallahu anh disclosed to the people that, look, he's an evil man. This is what he was doing. And he directed them to his coffers. And lo and behold, his coffers were full of gold and silver. So instead of burying him, they crucified him, and they never buried him. So then they brought another man in his place. And he said that I never saw a man who did not attempt the 5 prayers more than this person. So he would pray 5 times. This person, this bishop, he would pray 5 times. He was an ascetic. He was an ascetic. So there was nobody more that I saw who was more enthusiastic about the hereafter. So this was a Jewish Christian, a person who was on the true Christianity. And I saw him that he was devoted night and day. And I loved him as I never loved anyone before. Very pious person. So he took the bishop's place. And this continued for about 4 people. Salman was going to different bishops, and this continued like 4 times. One of them passed away, went to another. One of them passed away, went to another. One of them passed away, went to another. Until the last one, before he was dying, he said that a person is going to come, and his time is very near. He's going to come to a place where there is an abundance of great palms between 2 rocky valleys. Between 2 rocky valleys. So, so this Salman radiallahu anh, this was the prophecy of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this is a prophecy that is mentioned in the Old Testament. I'm sure the Vatican, the Dead Sea Scrolls and stuff, it was a pretty big deal, because it was found by a Jewish Christian. Jewish Christians exist even today. People don't know, but Jewish Christians exist even today. So when the Dead Sea Scrolls were found, there was a big uproar about that this is the original faith of Isa alayhi salam. And most likely there are scrolls in the Vatican as well, in Gospel of Barnabas and stuff, where Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is mentioned. So anyway, to cut a long story short, Salman radiallahu anh, he has this desire to go to Medina. And he goes to Medina. He collects all of this money. He goes to Medina, and the people that he's going with, they, instead of taking him to Medina, they sell him as a slave. And this is a lawless society. The Arabs were a lawless society. There's no such thing as ethics, law, code of morals, or anything along those lines. So they sold him to a Jewish man. So he's a slave now, because he has no support. There's no such thing as phone calls that, I'm in trouble. Right? So he's a slave. He's working as a slave. If he doesn't do as told, then he's going to be killed. So he spent his years as a slave until Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam comes to Medina. When he comes to Medina, he hears about the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He's working on his master's tree, bringing down the dates. And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he comes, his teacher told him 3 things about Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam: that he's not going to accept charity, number 1, that he is not going to accept charity, and that he will have a seal on his back. Right? He will not accept charity, but hadiyah he will accept. So the first time the Prophet Salman radiallahu anh, he meets the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he wants to test out what his teachers have advised him. So he gives sadaqah, and he says that I heard that you don't have enough money, so here's sadaqah. So he never partook from that sadaqah. Right? He gave it to his companions. The next day he brings him a hadiyah, that this is a gift. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam shared it with everyone, and he also ate it. These were dates that he was bringing. And then there was only one sign left, the sign of the seal, right? The seal of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the seal, it had multicolored hair. It was the size of a pigeon egg, about this big. Right? And it had multicolored hair on it. So Salman radiallahu anh wanted to see this final sign. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he understood this, and he allowed him. He lowered his qamis, and he allowed him to see the seal of the prophethood. And Salman radiallahu anh accepted Islam. But at that time he was a slave. So he tells the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that, Ya Rasulullah, I'm a slave. Right? So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was the one responsible for freeing Salman radiallahu anh. He was the one who gave him money, right, to free him. He himself, what he did was that Salman radiallahu anh, he had an agreement with his master So the master said that you have to plant 300 date trees and they have to give yield within 1 year. Like impossible conditions. So the Prophet ﷺ said, and you have to give me 40 grams of gold, or 40 uqiyas of gold. So these are impossible things for a slave to guarantee his freedom. So the Prophet said, no problem, I'll get it done. So he tells the companions that help your brother. He goes, just make the holes and I myself will plant them. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the Sahaba, they dug the holes and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam planted those dates himself with his own hands. To this day, the Bagh of Salman is still there in Medina. The Hadika of Salman radiallahu anhu is still there in Medina. I'm not sure if they bear fruit, but that garden is still present in Medina. And then the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he received a gift of a small gold ember, a small gold nugget, not ember, nugget. And he gave this to Salman. Salman said, no, it looks less. Rasulullah said, no, this is enough and it's the correct weight. So he took it to his master and his master said, yes, this is fine, and he was freed. So Salman, this is how he became Muslim. So the original Christianity did have mention of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So those people who are original Christians, they will ultimately come to Islam if they read the Old Testament. Of course, today that's not the case because majority of the Christians, they follow the New Testament and some of them don't even know what they're following. So you have different factions, Protestant, Catholic, Christian, this type of Christian, that type of Christian. And this is the story of Salman. It's a lot longer. I truncated a large portion of it just to keep everything short. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant us all tawfiq and understanding. Are there any questions?